If I start telling people about hell, I might just scare them off. Where are you going to scare them off to? Hell number 2? Or are you just going to sit there and let them burn?
This is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn. Welcome to the program. Don't forget to check us out on don'tletthemburn.com, also on social media and other video platforms and podcast platforms. You could also check us out on Patreon if you want to support the channel. Please support the channel. We need your help. Tonight, we're talking about Paranormal Shift, where we shift your paradigm from the junk that's out there to Jesus Christ. Tonight, I have Rhonda with me, and she's going to talk about the New Age. So she's going to explain her career in the entertainment industry, because she has a long, extensive career there, and some of her run-ins with some of the spiritual practices that she had since she was a kid. So Rhonda, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
All right, so take us through this journey. I mean, first introduce yourself to the audience, and let them know what you were like during this whole. What is your career like?
I would say once I became an adult, my career really began in the entertainment industry. I moved to Los Angeles and became a print and commercial booking agent. And then that was for 4 years. And then I was a talent manager for 9 years with some curves in other types of entertainment as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you work for pretty much some big companies or contracted and all that stuff. I guess, you don't have to name the names, but I know because you told me already.
Right.
So what was some of your experience growing up? Because, tonight we're talking about the New Age, and that's a pretty big topic, especially nowadays, since it's grown and ballooned into something much bigger. So what was your life like? You're growing up, what was your household like? And then take us from there into some of the experiences you had when you were younger.
Well, I had a great family. My mother stayed home with us. My father was an engineer. And they put us in private Christian school. But even from the time, I would say between 3 and 5, I remember it seems like I was always real sensitive to the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
There was apparently, I mean, it was some sort of spirit, but it didn't look like a spirit. It looked like a person, and it was an Indian, full headdress, and I always felt like he was there just watching me, like protecting me. This is what I was thinking, when I was however old I was. And it was just a thing. I mean, I had a sister. I didn't make up, playmates or anything like that. My mother would hear me talking. She'd be like, "Who are you talking to?" I'm like, "It's the Indian." And it was just a thing, which we even discussed, when I got older, and even as an adult, I'd be like, "What happened to that Indian?" So that was at a very early age. And I wasn't afraid or anything like that. There were also instances where I would have like a vision, I guess you would call it. But I would think I would think that it was a memory. And I said to my mother one time, I had this vision of she and I sitting outside at this table, snapping beans or peas or something. And I said to my mother, I'm like, "Hey, when are we gonna sit outside and snap beans again?" And my mother just looked at me and she said, "We've never snapped beans." She said, "I used to do that with my grandmother." And, so things like that.
So wait a minute before you go on. So let's go back to the Indian for a second.
Okay.
So were there any explanations maybe from your mama? What did they think it was? Was it a burial ground? Give us some of that.
Okay, well, when I was at that age, there were no explanations. And I do remember one day the Indian just left. And I remembered that when he left, like the last time, because he would leave. But it wasn't, but when he left that last time, I knew that he wasn't coming back. And I didn't know, I just now remembered that. So it wasn't, I knew that he was gone. But no, there were no explanations except when I got much older, I would say, I'd say to my mom, "Oh, remember the Indian?" She'd be like, "Yeah." And I'd be like, "What was that?" And she's like, "Well, I don't know. Maybe it was, the house was built on a burial ground or something."
Right.
And it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It just.
And to be clear, you had full-blown conversations with
With the Indian?
apparition.
Absolutely. Yes, I did.
And we don't have to go into, a huge amount of details, but do you have any recollections of what sort of conversations?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't remember any of the conversations. It seems like I would be the one that would be asking him questions.
Right.
And but I just don't it wasn't anything that was, I don't remember it being anything really deep.
You're a kid, so yeah. And to your recollection, this apparition wasn't scary.
No, not at all.
Right.
I was never afraid. For whatever reason, it was like I thought he was there protecting me.
Okay.
It was weird.
Right. I mean, as the mind of a child, that makes sense. It's not trying to scare you. It's not the thing under the bed or in the closet. So
Right, he's right there,
yeah,
hiding in
exactly.
plain sight.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. So what was the second one you mentioned a minute ago? Oh, snapping the peas. So, I mean, I don't know how to explain all of this immediately, but I don't think you're possessed. Doesn't sound like it, but sometimes these spirits have a way of putting things in your mind.
Right.
I know that's a fact. So that was the snapping the pea thing. Some people are going to say that, well, that's a past life. Or whatever.
Right.
You see this stuff in movies all the time. And just jumping back to the Indian again, the movie, the Amityville Horror, that whole scenario in New York, Amityville, New York, that house, the real house, was built on an Indian burial ground. And back where I used to live in Miami, Florida, we had tons of spiritual activity around the block that I was on 195th Street. And lo and behold, years later, there was they used to call it Joe Robbie Stadium. It's something else today. We crawled around the wall. There was a big wall. We used to climb it all the time, but we didn't really know it was there. And one day they fenced off an area and it turned out to be Indian burial ground.
Wow.
I'm not even saying, well, the spirits are coming from this graveside or whatnot, but when you go into all these paranormal areas, you see there's some sort of energy there. Let's just call it portal,
Right.
And you'll see these type of incidents around the world. How to explain that, I don't know, but it happens. So just filling people in on some other issues there. But this is your story, so keep going.
So those were just a couple of things that I remembered when I was really young. Another thing that I was always just drawn to things that the rest of my family was not. I can remember driving down a main street. There were many things on that street, but the thing that stuck out to me was a store called Bell Book and Candle. And in the same vicinity, there was a neon sign in a window that said psychic. And I just can remember always just wanting to go there. And I said to my mother one time, I want to go to that store. And she's like, no, we're not going to that store, you know, and I didn't understand why really, but I know that as soon as I could drive, you know, between 16 and 18, I was at the store. I went into that store and and I think that's, I would go in and they had all kinds of candles and incense and, you know, things like that. And that's kind of when I started becoming active in that kind of new age stuff.
Okay. So, I mean, you have these instances as a young child, and then the visuals from these psychic parlors or whatnot drew you in more, and you're pretty much curious. Do you remember anything? I know you're not a big movie buff, but do you remember anything in your entertainment that maybe made you curious as well?
You know, we were not allowed to watch like crazy movies or anything like that, but the one thing, and I do definitely remember seeing psychics and like trans channeling type people on those talk shows, like back in the day, you know, like Phil Donahue and Sally Jesse Raphael and that whole crew that was on TV back then. Right. They used to have guests, and some of them, I remember seeing some of those like new agey type people on those shows. So that's probably when I was, you know, really young, where some of that came from, because no one in my family, you know, ever even was into any of that stuff.
So for those that don't know, we're talking about early 80s, late 80s.
What?
In that time frame, 70s, right? So
okay, go ahead, date me, Chris.
Hey, I'm in that age frame too, so you know, I'm dating myself. So because I know some of the, if you're younger, you hear these names, you're like, who's that? You know?
Right.
Phil Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael, but there was an invasion, a spiritual invasion that came in with the Beatles, with the Hinduism and the Spiritism and all this stuff. They weren't the only people, but that they led a massive charge, especially after the age of Crowley. You had all these musicians, and they would influence the TV hosts and all that. So that's another story in itself. So tell me, around what age is this that you're about to get into, you know, the spiritism?
Well, I was definitely driving, because I remember driving down to that Bell Book and Candle store. And you know, and my parents, I just went there myself. And then probably at 18, 19, is when I really started getting into like the metaphysical. And there was like Louise Hay I was a big Louise Hay person. And I would go to this store and get all of her books. And that's kind of how I started living, like according to any kind of illness or anything like that. It was like, oh, it's a metaphysical causation. And, you know, that's what I would go by. That's how I started living my life. And on top of all that, I started getting involved with a lot of psychics. Yep. Now, the psychics that worked in those types of stores, that was one kind of psychic where, you know, even I was still very skeptical of the people that like worked, you know, in those places. But I did it all. I mean, the tarot cards and the I Ching and the I would literally spend thousands of dollars having this woman, you know, do my whole astrological, you know, chart, and she would go deep and and I did that for many years of my life. But I was also learning. I was learning how to do it.
Right.
And I would say by the time I got to my 20s, that's when I really started. When I was in Los Angeles, you know, everybody has a psychic to the stars. And I can also remember, I mean, and they were very expensive. The one thing about these psychics is they do give accurate information, but it's not coming from a godly source.
Absolutely.
And you know, when you're not a follower of Jesus, you have no idea that it's demonic.
Right. I mean, these demons, they are very connected to your life. They follow you when you don't even know. I remember this next door neighbor, a Rastafarian dude, came to her house. Don't know what they were dealing with, but when she opened the door and let him in, he just froze. And she was like, "What's wrong?" And he pointed. He said, "You don't see that?" He was open, I guess, from the marijuana and whatnot. And he saw a guy standing right inside of her house. She couldn't see it. So sometimes they're there following you. And when you go to the psychic lady, they're giving them information on. I mean, this is old school. This is old tactics. These what do you call them? Enlightened ones. They know so many tricks, and we're like babies to them, you know? So go ahead.
So yeah, there was a big part of my life where I would go, I mean, I'd fly to New York and would go see this particular psychic. And she was just right on, like, about everything. She would come to Vegas and, you know, she'd get a room, and all my friends, I'd be like, oh, you know, so-and-so's in town, and if you guys want to go see her. So, you know, I'd get a bunch of people, they'd go, and she would blow everybody away. During that same period of time, I also remember being able to just see things like on people. And I'll give you an example. There was like, if there was something that wasn't right about this person, one of the things, and I'll give you something specific, there was this girl that had a big black dog just with her all the time. And it wasn't a real physical dog, but I could see the dog everywhere she went. That dog was right there with her, guarding her. And it was like an attack dog. It was, and I knew, I said to one of my girlfriends, I said, something's wrong with this girl. I said, everywhere she goes, there's this big black dog that's walking with her. And when I say that, I mean, it wasn't a physical dog. It was obviously some sort of, what do you call it? A spirit dog?
Guide, animal guide. They have tons of names for them, depending on the culture you go to. And you know, whether it's in shamanism or whatever else, you know, we see these same things in like Harry Potter's Fantastic Beasts, the Golden Compass, all these spirit animals. You see it in the martial arts and in Hinduism. It's all over the place.
Right.
It's in almost every culture. So not surprised there. And you are, or you were, or still, I don't know. Some people have a gift to see some of the spiritual stuff out there without even being intertwined in the New Age or any spiritual practice. They can just see an apparition, you know. And I don't know what to call it, but you were open to that.
Yeah, I mean, and now as an adult, I was trying to think back to, what was it that led me down that path, and I really cannot put my finger on it.
Mhm.
I don't know what it was, and I know that none of my family was involved in any of that stuff. I can remember, and this was probably when I was in like junior high school or something. It was, we were sneaking around with we got a Ouija board somehow. And I can remember we were doing the Ouija board, and that is actually how I found out who JP Morgan was.
Uh,
I had no idea who I'd never heard of that person before. And then, and that person, whatever that was, the spirit, whatever it was, named themselves as JP Morgan. That's where that little thing went on the Ouija board.
right.
And
I'll pause for a second there. So I didn't mention this earlier, but the Bible talks about familiar spirits. Sometimes these spirits show up as a family member, or they'll show up as a famous person.
right.
No, you have people like Hillary Clinton trying to channel the spirit of XYZ. And you had Lincoln's wife, Ronald Reagan's wife into spiritism. This stuff gets really freaky, but familiar spirits are real, and many people are into seeing their grandma,
Right.
their mom, or their uncle, or whoever that passed. And some of them go down the road of inviting these spirits in, sometimes to even stay with them because of the empathy for the loved one they lost. And these same spirits, if they don't wreck your life in the beginning, eventually they're going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So hold on 1 minute. All right. So if you want to know where to find information about familiar spirits in the Bible, you go to Leviticus 19:31, 26, and 27. 20 verse 6 and also 27. Now, you can also go to Deuteronomy 18 verses 9 through 14. And there are other places that address spiritual issues, but you'd have to search that out for yourself. So continue with your story about JP Morgan.
Okay. Well, first of all, like, JP Morgan was not familiar to me. Like, that's how I actually found out who JP Morgan even was, because I remember all of us, like, none of us knew. We were like in, junior high school. And I ended up looking, because we were like, are you famous? And I ended up looking in an encyclopedia. And that's how I found out who JP Morgan was. And even then, who cares? He's not famous to me. Like, what was he, born in the 1800s or something? He was like old.
Yeah.
So, but much later in my life, all of these things, this is when I got saved, all of these things came back, to my mind, and were the things that were not of God. So,
Right. So with this experience with the Ouija board, do you think, I mean, obviously it's trying to lead you somewhere when it's mentioned in JP Morgan. So do you see any direct connection moving further into your life to that experience?
I don't know, money. That's, I was always, I mean, and another part of the new age stuff for me was where, it's the creative visualization. It's like, creating your own whatever, the greatest salesman in the world, and you dream it, and think it, you think it, and it will be. And that's literally how I live my life.
Right.
And I think a lot of people get caught up in that because, again, it works. It seems to, it appears to. Maybe everybody doesn't have this experience, but for me, it was that experience. It was like, oh, I'm always in the right place at the right time. And, it was that kind of life. And it's just such a facade. It's like here you are riding shotgun with the enemy and you don't even know it.
Right. Yeah.
It's just, there's that thin veil where he keeps you in that certain place. I'm talking about before you get saved, because I wasn't, it's not like I was, I'm a, devil worshiper. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that.
No one ever thinks that.
What?
Yeah. No one ever thinks that, right?
No, but those are the types of, that's the type of life that I had before I was saved. It was a lot of, you are the one that's capable of, building this and creating that, and, dream it, think it, and it is.
Translation, the spirits want you to think that you have power, and it's the old lie of the devil, you shall be as gods.
That's right.
And this whole thing goes into The Secret, vision boards. Now wait, don't get mad at me. I know that not every vision board is psychic and all this stuff, but the term comes from the New Age, comes from witchcraft and stuff like that. So you could find this stuff all over the place, and especially when Christians tell you could speak things into existence, they're taking the whole passage out of context when it's God the one speaking the things into existence. Only he could do that. So we're trying to be as gods, trying to stare at a wall full of vacation spots and cars and money. I'm going to call these things into my life. Well, for those that don't know, I mean, these demons, they have power to manipulate reality. And I'm not stretching that to some weird doctrine. I'm saying they will bless you too. That's why the children of Israel got in trouble, because they were following demons and they were doing spiritual adultery, and the Bible explains a lot of this stuff. You just have to get in there and read it for yourself. Go into the Old Testament, you'll see it all over the place. They would go back and forth, and there was always a remnant that stayed with God, and the others would follow Baal and the Queen of Heaven, and Ashtaroth, and on. These different deities, so-called, fallen angels. So anyway, continue.
There was something else that just triggered a memory. I had a dream, and I was like 10 years old, and I remember having this dream because I was so excited, and I dreamt of this house that had, now remember, this is in the 70s, in the mid 70s. So, things were, green and gold and those kind of crazy colors. But when I had this dream about this very modern home, and that was even when I was a youngster, that was like my style. I liked real modern looking things, but I specifically remember the carpet in this house was peach. Everything was very beautiful. And I was excited. I was like, oh, that's going to be my house. And, I never focused on that or anything, but I tell you, when the very first place that I moved out of, I was making a lot of money. So I got this, and now we're talking about it was the mid 80s. I rented this townhouse, and back then it was like $1,000 a month. And that was the house that I dreamt about when I was like 10 years old. I didn't put it together at that time. It was after I had even moved out of that house. that it clicked in my mind. I was like, I dreamt about this place. That was another very strange, uh, occurrence.
Yeah.
One of the most scary ones that I had.
Wait a minute, you got a scary one? I didn't hear about this.
Yeah, this is a scary one. Other than, I mean, there have been some scary instances, but this is one where I was like, oh no, I'm not going to go there. And I think I saw this person was on one of those talk shows. I want to say Phil Donahue, I'm not sure. But this person was a trans channeler, and I still remember the name and everything. The name was Ramtha.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh my goodness.
What?
There's a movie out there, The Road to Armageddon or something like that, where this lady was channeling, I think her name is Jay-Z Knight, and she was channeling Ramtha.
Really?
Yeah.
So was this
check
recent?
No, this documentary came out in the mid 2000s somewhere, but the videos from the time that you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where I first became familiar with trans channeling. And I remember the person would, walk around the audience, and then she would get, she would go into some kind of trance, and she would be able to give certain people in the audience information. And there was a way that she said, okay, you can do this too. And I mean, I was in my late teens, early 20s, somewhere in there. I mean, I'm sorry, I was in my 20s, my early 20s. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this. And I had watched a bunch of things, on Ramtha and trans channeling and all that. And I remember laying down on my bed, and this was in the middle of the afternoon, and they tell you, to relax and, whatever, and you just go into this deep meditation. Well, I felt like I was going into a deep meditation, and I heard, like the old radios. You might be able to describe this better than me, because people today, I don't think we have that sound anymore. But it used to go when you were looking for the station, like,
yeah.
And then when I heard that, at the same time, I felt like I was gonna go somewhere, and I was like, no, I'm not going. I just stopped.
Yeah.
But that to me was like, okay, wherever I was going, I didn't want to go, and it was really scary.
Yeah, it's like you were there some of the testimonies I've heard of people that were into stuff like that. It's like these levels, but you go there in your mind, and then when you finally get to a certain place, these spirits pop up. It's just like when you take ayahuasca or DMT or something, these weird beings pop up. I'm not sure if it's all just totally in the mind. Can't answer that, but from what I've heard, it's usually, this. It's like your I don't know how to call it. Your spirit or something just opens up.
Right.
All of a sudden, it's like you're in another reality, but you're still there, but you're in another reality. I think a lot of it's in here, but somehow they're able to connect with you.
Right.
And the sound of the radio. I've heard of something called the clockwork elves, and when they pop up, you hear music that you would hear in a carnival. Stuff like that.
Right.
So people out there playing with this stuff, and some of them lose their minds. Go ahead.
I believe it. So that was a situation where I never went there again, never touched it. But it did not, it didn't, deter me from all of the other new age practices. And I mean, I was into them all. I was really, really into the Chinese astrology. And, people would come to me, and say when they had a problem, and I'd be like, okay, well, what's the, I need the birth date and the year. And, I'd go into this whole thing, and that's the kind of counseling that I would be giving people, which is, it's, when I look back on it now,
Right.
it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I see, in our modern society, we're kind of disconnected from the spiritual side of things. When you go to other countries, they're all open to this stuff. It's nothing to them. Getting a tattoo so a spirit can come inside of you. It's nothing to them, But since we're so industrialized in a sense, and we're through evolution and other modern thinking, atheism and whatnot, and entertainment shows it to you, but it
Right.
makes it seem all like it's fantasy, right? And that's how these other things are in the underground, and they just come up right in your neighborhood. There's a little psychic shop, or one time we were on South Beach, and they had some sort of symposium going on below my office, and my friend that was with me, he saw I don't know if they call marbles or whatnot, but they had the rune stone, the rune writing on them. I don't know exactly what they were, but the lady was calling him home, and he was going. I said, "What are you doing? We don't take part in that stuff, man." You know, I was just blown away that he was just ready to go over there. And I looked at her and just kept moving. And they're all out in the open now. It's not even a game. Yeah.
No.
Oh, before we go on, by the way, for those of you that want to know what documentary I was talking about, it's one called Megiddo 1 and Megiddo 2. Megiddo 1 is called The March to Armageddon. Megiddo 2 is called The New Age. And you really need to watch that one. It shows all the weirdos at the time that were channeling different entities, because what they want you to do ultimately is believe in UFOs, and that these are the saviors of the planet and the lizard people, and on and on and on. So give us another one, because I know there had to be more than one dark period in your life.
Well, the scarier moments, I mean, the whole life was dark before Jesus, but it doesn't, always appear that way from our perspective. But something else that was sort of scary was the house that I told you earlier that I dreamt when I was like 10 years old. I was in my late teens, early 30s. That was the first place that I'd moved out to. There was a period during that time, and I don't know why this was, but I still had my childhood Bibles. And when I say childhood Bibles, I mean it was an adult Bible. It was the King James Version, a couple of them. And it just seemed very random that I would just open, I wanted to start reading the Bible. But during that period, it was a period right before I was going to move to Los Angeles. There were many nights that I would hear scratching and like moaning, and it was like someone, it was the weirdest thing. It was like someone was like in the walls, and I would call my mother. I wasn't like on drugs or anything like that. And I'd be like, Mom, I don't know what's going on. Can you hear this? And I would explain it to her, and she would just stay on the phone with me. And I was going to be moving to Los Angeles. So it wasn't, it came to an end, but that was, that happened for a while. And my mom was always a late bird. So she was up, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd be like, Mom, I don't know what this is. I'm scared. So
it's like these spirits are always trying to get your attention. And only God knows the conversation they probably had between themselves. Maybe we can get her, or, well, we know her from back here. maybe we can get her attention again and she'll be on another path. Speculation, but interested, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of these movies that come out, the horror movies, a lot of them are based on real stuff. They even consult witches for some of these horror movies. I mean, real life witches and psychics and whatnot. So um, uh, the kingdom of darkness, they have to have conversations. Right? They're not just sitting down there fiddling with their fingers or hooves or whatever. Whatever, whatever
Twiddling their thumbs.
Yeah, they're not in hell. They're on earth.
Yeah.
The hell was made for the devil and his angels.
Yeah.
So it only makes sense that these evil entities would want to disturb the lives of human beings. I mean, you go back to Lucifer. What did he do? Came in and usurped the kingdom.
Yeah.
It's the first political takeover, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he wrecked the lives of newly created beings. So why wouldn't they continue? Why not?
Right.
Anything else you want to say?
No, but I mean, I just, they had me without scaring me. You know what I mean? That like kind of drove me. Well, not really, because I spent the next however many years, now I'm going to psychic land.
Yeah. All right. So what's next?
That was a scary experience. And I also remember I would go to psychics because I would experience like that. I guess it's called the sleep paralysis or if, it's like something you're kind of awake, but that time in there, it was very frightening. And I felt that it was something that was dark.
Right.
So when I went to, the psychic, I'd be like, well, this is what happens. And then she would say, oh, all you have to do is, just think of the white light and, and that'll take care of it.
Like Poltergeist, a movie Poltergeist.
Caroline,
I saw that. Out of the light, Caroline. Yeah, anyway. But I had my own I call them demonic attacks. And one of them I knew it was multiple apparitions, but I couldn't see until one manifested in my room. This wasn't the medical not apparition, but sleep paralysis where you're trying to wake up but your body can't move. It's not that. Okay. There was an entity in my room. And I've been through that a couple times in my life, more than a couple. But at that time, this was 1994, I was listening to a lot of Wu-Tang Clan and R. Kelly and stuff like that. And I started going back to church, and it looks like the spirits that were around me that I didn't know about, I was about 20, I was in my early 20s. Anyway, they got mad, I guess. You want to pay attention to Jesus? I'm going to wreck your life. I was trying to get counseling from church people and no one had answers. So anyway, that's my story. Continue with yours.
I don't, there was another, I didn't talk about this yet. There was actually it was not a store. It was like in a strip mall type place. And it was called Synergy. And I can't remember what their claims were, but it was just one of those places where you go in and, you lay down, not in a room or anything. They had like, it was a table in public. It was inside their building. And I think they labeled it like, oh, you're going to de-stress or whatever, but you'd lay down on the table and close your eyes and, and the woman would talk you through and say, okay, now what do you see? Oh, I see an old white man with a long beard, and and I'm by a river with a lot of rocks and it's very peaceful, and oh, in the distance there's a waterfall. And that was, I think that was just supposed to like de-stress me or something. I don't remember, but it was one of those new age things,
Yeah.
anything new age, I was all about it.
And
I'm trying it.
for people that don't know, New Age is like a cafeteria religion. They take things from Buddhism and Hinduism and this over there and that over there, and they put it all together. So when it sounds so familiar to somebody that says they haven't practiced the New Age because they borrowed from what you're practicing, you know?
Right.
And like what you're describing is almost like the visualization. It's like the visualization, but then it goes into relaxation where you get your heart rate down and you start doing the breathing, and something else manifests later. Go ahead.
That's scary.
This is familiar in the superhero genre as well. I watched a couple, many superhero TV shows where the protagonist has to be stressed out, or they have to concentrate and breathe. Or remember when Luke Skywalker, well, you didn't watch this. I don't think you did.
No, I never saw Star Wars.
So when he was about to blow up the Death Star, he had to use the Force. He had to relax and then let the Force guide him. And then he was able to shoot the missiles into the hole. It's from that Eastern mysticism. So anyway.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I want to jump ahead now just to 2 years before I got saved, and I was extremely healthy. I'm doing the new age stuff. There was at that time there was one health place where everybody went. It was in a certain part of town. And you would get all your stuff from there. You could order some things online. But I started getting sick. I would feel like I was just going to die. And I think it was a panic attack. I just remember going to the doctor, and I said to this doctor, something's wrong with me. And, they give you their tests and a few blood tests or whatever, and there's nothing, everything is great. And then I said, there is something wrong with me. I said, I want you to check every single thing on this piece of paper. I want every test. And I remember her saying, if I check every single test on that paper, they're going to think I'm crazy. And I said, I don't care, but something was wrong. Mm-hmm. So again, here I go into the the demonic new age stuff. I go to my hairdresser, and he was very well traveled, and he had connections everywhere. And I said, listen, I need you to hook me up with somebody in New Orleans. I want to go to one of those voodoo people. Somebody has a spell on me. And he was like, and he's like, nobody has a spell on you. He goes, people are praying for you. And I was like, what? And, and I just kind of dropped it. And I decided that it was the environment that I was working in that was causing this. Mm-hmm. So I left. I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. Even though I was making a bunch of money, I said, I'm out. So when I left, I was still, running with the devil. Mm-hmm. But that part of my life was gone. And it seemed that those attacks, or whatever they were not happening as often, even though they were happening. They were still happening. And once I got saved, I kind of thought back, and I said, I think that was like a serious, like, spiritual battle, going on. There was a battle for my soul. That's what I thought it was after, once I got saved.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I've heard some, scary stories about, decapitated entities, disembodied some of them turn out, they'll look kind. Others, they just look like monsters. So they'll appear, any way they want to whoever they're either trying to torment or guide, as long as they are in control. Because once some people try to get rid, even if they're not saved, if they try to get rid of these things, they wreak havoc in their homes, especially at night. People have waken up with statues in front of their bed that the statues are weeping, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of weird stuff, because this reality that we're in, we're thrusted into a pagan world. So that's just it's an evil world. We're born evil and we do evil things. And Jesus is the solution to get us out of that dilemma. He made a way, but unfortunately, most of the world don't want to hear that. And what's peculiar is in the book of Revelation, you have the wrath of God pouring out, and they know it's God, but they won't give up their worship of demons, their fornication, the witchcraft, the drug abuse, and on and on. So anyway, this was yes, thank you, Jesus, for real.
I know.
This was an interesting story here, and if you have questions, you can write. You can contact me on my website or through any of the social media platforms that we're on. The links are below. If you feel like you are being called by Jesus, it's not a mistake. It's the best decision you could ever make in your life. Anything you want to say before we go? Any advice you want to give to anyone that is living a life that you once lived?
Yeah, I would just say surrender to the Lord. He's real. And we always pray for the Lord to reveal himself to people and for him to save people, for him to soften people's hearts. And once he shows himself to you, don't turn away. You run toward him. You run toward him. I mean, my life was changed forever. And I'm just so grateful and so thankful. I really am, because I was on my way to hell, and hell is a real place. I was on my way to hell, and I didn't even, I could have been just blinded. I could have still been blinded. But the Lord is so merciful, and he has so much grace, and he has so much love. And I mean, he disciplines us too.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus, he's the only way. The Bible does not have errors, and that is the absolute #truth, period.
Absolutely. I just want to encourage anyone out there to be honest with yourself. If you're truly seeking, go into the Bible. Ask God to reveal himself to you. He revealed himself to people 2,000 years ago, and it changed the course of the world. And that course of the world is coming to a close soon. So you're going to want to get things in order. And he's the only one that could put things in order. So Jesus Christ came to die for your sins, my sins, the whole world. And you just have to yield to him today. And remember, he resurrected. He's the only God-man, 100% God, 100% man, full deity that rose from the grave. And it's recorded in history. Anyone that has gone to try to disprove that, guess what happened to them? They became Christians. How about that?
Come on.
Right? So what else can you do? If you want to still go down this road to perdition, to hell, or do you want to have eternal life through Jesus Christ? I encourage you today, choose Jesus. If you like our videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to get all our frequent updates.